Hello, and welcome to the Student Learning Commons. My name is Mackenzie, and today we are going to talk about organizing your expository essay. Now, before we get started, I would like to take the time to acknowledge the land that we all sit on. Although some of you may be watching this workshop from outside these ancestral lands, I would like to acknowledge that I work, live, and play on the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, and Quiquitlam peoples, and all three of the Student Learning Commons locations also operate on these lands. Let's start by running through what this workshop will cover. First, we'll discuss the central goals of the expository essay. Next, we'll outline the general structure of an expository essay. And after this, we will get into a discussion of the strategies you may want to use when writing your expository essay, starting with strategies for outlining and then discussing strategies for reverse outlining. To get an idea of the goals of an expository essay, it is helpful to first define what an exposition is. An exposition is a comprehensive description and explanation of an idea or theory. Take a moment to reflect on this definition. What does it mean to you? Does it give you any ideas as to what the goals of an expository essay might be? What are these goals? An expository essay is an opportunity for writers to research and write about an idea or theory in depth. Expository essays also ask writers to take a position and/or develop an argument about the ideas, topics, or theories they are writing about. As such, the goals of an expository essay are to take a deep dive into the given theory or idea by either A, taking a position on the chosen theory or idea, B, developing and presenting an argument about this theory or idea, or C, taking up both of these approaches simultaneously. When discussing the structure of an expository paragraph, it is easiest to first break it down into more digestible chunks. Purdue Owl explains that expository essays are comprised of the following 5 parts. First, a clear, concise, and defined thesis statement. Second, body paragraphs that include evidence. Third, clear and logical transitions. Fourth, a conclusion. And finally, fifth, a little bit of creativity. But let's talk about that last part about creativity. Often, expository essays can feel a bit formulaic. Put the thesis in the first paragraph, develop that thesis through 3 body paragraphs, and then move into a conclusion. But writers can find freedom and creativity within that structure, rather than feeling trapped by that structure. Your goal in writing an expository essay, as with other forms of writing, is to connect with and leave an impression on your reader. Creativity and excitement about what you have to say helps you to accomplish both goals. We will talk about the thesis statement, body paragraphs, transitions, and conclusion in the upcoming slides. A thesis statement is made up of a central claim or position you wish to take in your paper, as well as the reasons you have to support your claim. Your reasons are likely a very succinct and high-level summary of the evidence that you've researched in support of your claim. 2 common structures for a thesis statement are claim because reasons or because reasons claim. So, if I was asked to write an expository essay on the controversial issue of cats versus dogs, I might develop a thesis like this. Dogs make better pets because dog owners, on average, have better health and longer life expectancies, a statistic that is often associated with the regular walks that dog owners take with their pets. Or maybe I would present an argument like this. Because they are more independent and self-sufficient, cats are better pets for urbanites who live in small spaces and work outside of the home. Notice that by presenting reasons, thesis statements also provide a much more focused scope for the discussion in a paper. A paper that simply tried to prove that cats are better than dogs or that dogs are better than cats would quickly deteriorate because there are so many different criterion for comparing pets. Having a clear and well-scoped thesis can help you to effectively plan and organize your entire expository essay. Think back to one of the two examples I provided. You can rewind and listen to the recording again if you'd like. Think about what kind of evidence the reader would need to provide to convince you of their argument. What kinds of counter-arguments would they need to address? You can pause the recording now to give yourself some time to think about this. You can do this same exercise as you are developing your own expository essay. Here are the steps. First, identify the central claim or position you want to take in your essay. Make sure that this claim or position is addressing the assignment guidelines you were given, so it probably shouldn't be about cats and dogs. Second, identify the reasons you have for making that claim or taking that position. Third, take a close and critical look at your thesis statement and ask yourself, what information do I need to provide my reader to convince them of my point? Who might disagree with my argument, and how can I respond to them? Now, let's talk about our body paragraphs. When writing body paragraphs, a helpful acronym to remember is ICE, which stands for Introduce, Cite, Explain. As you are writing your paragraphs, remember that each paragraph should introduce an idea in support of your overall thesis or argument. Cite some evidence. Often, this evidence will be what you found in your research, and you will need to cite it formally according to the citation style that your assignment guidelines asks you to use. But that evidence can also sometimes be anecdotal, i.e. coming from your own life and/or experiences. Explain. Often, writers will stop after the citation and move on to the next paragraph. However, a well-developed paragraph in an expository essay will also include an explanation of the evidence. This is how you, as the writer, tell your reader why you have brought in this evidence, how it directly supports your thesis, and/or what you want the reader to take away from the evidence specifically. Returning to the argument that I started to develop in the last slide, dogs make better pets because dog owners, on average, have better health and longer life expectancies, a statistic that is often associated with the regular walks that dog owners take with their pets. One of my body paragraphs would need to establish that dogs have better health than that dog owners have better health than cat owners. Depending on how much evidence I have, I might also talk about life expectancies in this paragraph, or I might split that into its own paragraph. So I would introduce the idea of dogs making better pets because of the life expectancies of their owners. Then I would cite my evidence, which in this case would likely be stats and physiological information. Then I would conclude by explaining that evidence and how it supports my overall argument about dogs as good pets. And this last part is very important because if I don't connect to my overall thesis or argument, my body paragraphs can end up reading like a list. Dogs live longer and can improve the health of their owners through regular walks without any through line. The thesis is the through line that keeps the paper together, so keep connecting your ideas and your evidence back to your thesis. According to Purdue OWL, a good conclusion does not simply restate the thesis, but readdresses it in light of the evidence provided. It is at this point of the essay that students will inevitably begin to struggle, like I struggle pronouncing that word. This is the portion of the essay that will leave the most immediate impression on the mind of the reader. Therefore, it must be effective and logical. Do not introduce any new information in the conclusion. Rather, summarize, synthesize, and come to a conclusion concerning the information presented in the body of your essay. Since you often don't know exactly where you're going when you start writing your paper, your first draft conclusion is often a good introduction for your final paper. And then you can refocus your conclusion writing on explaining what you now understand and can share about your topic, having researched and written this essay. Returning once again to my example about pet ownership, my conclusion might speak both to people who currently own dogs, perhaps with tips to improve their own health and the health of their pets, maybe, And it could also appeal to people who are currently considering getting dogs and aren't sure what to choose. Sorry, to people who are currently considering getting pets and aren't sure what type to choose. If you want to be very persuasive, I could even address my conclusion to people who would consider themselves cat people and explain to them why even those who most love cats can benefit from bringing a dog into their lives, homes, and hearts. Many students begin writing a paper without first creating an outline. However, outlining is a very useful strategy to help clarify thinking, guide research, and support the overall structure of one's essay. A very basic outline consists of 1, a thesis statement, 2, paragraph topic sentences, ideally 1 for each body paragraph, and 3, a conclusion. To this, you can add more details as you see fit. For example, you may want to add point form notes for how you will explain and support the topic sentence in each paragraph. If you would like, you can also include quotations that you hope to use. When writing an outline, it is important to keep in mind these top 3 priorities. First, you want to ensure that you present strong, engaging ideas for your introduction and conclusion to help you answer the so what question. The so what question is essentially discussing why the argument you're making matters. So if you make an argument and then a critic can say, so what? Why does this matter? If you can't answer that question, you probably don't have a very important argument. Second, you want to include a clear thesis statement that readers are able to follow through your paper. And third, you will want to ensure that the main points of your essay are organized in a way that allows them to flow logically from your introduction through to your conclusion. Once you have completed your outline, it's time to start writing. However, keep in mind that ideas often shift when we are writing, thanks to the awesome aha moments that come when we make a connection while writing that we weren't anticipating. That is why we need to review and revise our essays after we finish writing our first drafts. Even the best outline papers typically need to be reviewed and revised at this point. This is also the point where you may want to consider employing the strategy that we are discussing next, reverse outlining. Reverse outlining provides you an opportunity to reflect on the development of your ideas and how they changed or shifted through the writing process. So how do we reverse an outline? First, print out a hard copy of your paper so that you can write in the margins, or consider using the comments function on Microsoft Word. Read through your essay and make note of the major points you make. Second, create a separate Word document and use the space to summarize your essay and the main points you make in point form. Third, return to the original outline you created and edit it based on how you actually developed your ideas and points during the writing process. As you do this, make a mental note of any themes you notice. In what ways did you diverge from your original outline? If your paper differs drastically from your outline, don't worry. This shows the development and evolution of your thought and your research throughout the writing process. And this development is something to be really proud of, as it's led to a deeper and richer paper than you had originally planned for. So make sure to take this time to give yourself a little pat on the back for all the great work you've put in. As the last step of reverse outlining, try printing out your paper or simply reading it on your computer screen if printing isn't convenient. Read your paper out loud to yourself. You may want to consider audio recording on your phone as you read through your paper, because listening back on this can be really helpful. Sometimes you hear your essay differently when you're listening to it rather than reading it. So this can be a very helpful process. When completing a reverse outline, there are 3 priorities you want to keep in mind. First, ask yourself if each topic sentence conveys one important idea. Remember, each body paragraph should include a topic sentence that essentially serves as a mini thesis statement for that paragraph. Each body paragraph should discuss only one main idea. If you find that you have a body paragraph that discusses multiple main ideas, you may want to consider breaking this up into multiple paragraphs. Second, Ask yourself if every concluding sentence conveys a sense of why the idea presented in that paragraph matters and why it is important. This goes back to the "so what" question we discussed earlier. Lastly, ask yourself if each paragraph relates to the main objective of your paper in the same way. When we look at our body paragraphs, it should be clear how each paragraph is connected back to our thesis statement. If our reader isn't able to make this connection, then there may be something missing from our paper. So try to make sure that these connections are as clear as possible and they're as clear as possible to your reader. As this video comes to an end, I want to remind you that you don't have to write alone because the Student Learning Commons is here to help. Whether you're still in the planning stages of your paper or if you've already completed a draft, we're happy to answer any questions you might have or provide you with feedback regardless of what stage you're at. Feel free to book a one-on-one consultation with us either virtually or in person on the Burnaby, Surrey, or Vancouver campuses. The Student Learning Commons also offers recorded workshops like the ones you're watching right now, videos, and live workshops. If you finish your paper a few days before your deadline, you may also want to submit your paper to Right Away to get some feedback from us. If you finish your assignment well before your deadline, you may even be able to resubmit a second or third draft to Right Away. Now, as we wrap up, I would like to wish you luck and thank you for watching this video. Take care, and we hope to see you at the Student Learning Commons soon.